Welcome to Ohio Roots, the official podcast of the Ohio Genealogical Society. Join us as we embark on a captivating journey through Ohio's rich genealogy, history, and abundant resources. Hosted by me, OGS Executive Director Noel Poirier, this podcast brings you insightful conversations with a diverse array of guests, from OGS members, chapter leaders, and staff to renowned genealogists, historians, and influential figures within the genealogical community. Each episode delves into fascinating topics and captivating stories. So grab your headphones, hit that play button, and join us on this enthralling journey of Ohio's roots. Welcome to the OGS Ohio Roots podcast. Today we are joined by Laurie Hermance-Moore, the founder of Heritage Bridge, a premier Midwest genealogy firm. Laurie's professional journey began when she researched the history of her own Victorian home and successfully traced her birth parents as an adoptee. In this episode, we discuss her team's unique approach to forensic genealogy and family legacy projects. You'll learn how they use DNA and deep document research to uncover the stories of ancestors that other methods alone couldn't find. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Laurie Hermance-Moore. Well, Laurie Hermance-Moore of Heritage Bridge, thank you so much for joining me today on the OGS Ohio Roots podcast to discuss your work and what Heritage Bridge does and how you help people. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, Noel. I really appreciate the invitation.
I'll start with the question I ask all of my guests first, which is, how did you get the genealogy bug? What was it that got you hooked on doing genealogy for yourself and then ultimately now helping people through Heritage Bridge?
Right. Well, mine was that back in 2012, my husband and I bought a Victorian house in Columbus, just south of the Ohio State campus. And we had wanted to own an old house for a long time. And so we decided we're going to it needed some love, so we started working on it. But I got really curious about who had lived there. And when I had formerly worked at the Columbus Metropolitan Library. I have a master's in library science. And so I knew people there who knew how to do genealogy, and I got some help, and I figured out, the people who had lived in the house over time, managed to write a little timeline history of that. But it was cool because as we further lived in the house, for example, under the stairs to the basement, we found this board up underneath the stairs where the original owner had put his initials and a date. But I only knew that because I knew who the original owner was by then. So I got kind of hooked by understanding, and we had a wedding in our front parlor, and all of these things were so cool. But I had never researched my own family because I'm adopted. So is my husband. And I kind of got bit by the bug and decided, what if I could find my birth parents? So it turned out to be easier than I thought in my case, and pretty easy for my husband as well. So we're adoptees who have made contact with our birth families now.
Okay.
So I got so hooked on it at that point, I decided that I wanted it to be my final career and started working on a path of skilling up and becoming accredited before I started my own business.
So talk to me a little bit about how Heritage Bridge came about.
Sure. So this was back in 2015. I got the Boston University certificate in genealogical research. It's also kind of important to know I was already a librarian. I was already working as a researcher, as a market researcher. So I've been a researcher my whole career. It's just that genealogy research is so challenging and so interesting compared to other kinds of research that I've done. But I decided to go ahead and form my company in 2016 and honestly tried to think of names that seemed meaningful to me that I could get the URL. Right. So I've had it for 10 years now, but I left corporate and ramped it up to be my full-time job in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, I visited the website and people can go there. We'll talk about web address at the end of our chat, but it's amazing all the work you do. Let folks know all the kind of different work that you do at Heritage Bridge.
Sure. We focus on four main areas. So we'll take the easiest one first, which is we serve attorneys with heir search research and real estate research. So for example, when someone dies intestate without a will, sometimes you don't know who their family is. And that's when an attorney will come to us and have us research the family according to state law, who's the next of kin. And we write reports that are court ready. We testify in court if we need to. But that's what we do for attorneys. That's a little more straightforward. Now, on the family history side, there's three main areas that we serve. One we call family legacy, and this is for someone who wants their family history documented, but they have maybe tried a little bit on Ancestry. It's easy to get overwhelmed. They admit they're overwhelmed by it. Often they're a high-level professional who doesn't really have time to do it, because we all know how time-consuming genealogy is. So they hire us to document their family, and often we're publishing that in books. But so they're all about the legacy of it. They tend to say things like, I want my children to know that people in our family had to work really hard to get to where we are now. That's often a really common theme. So that's what we call it, family legacy. We do a lot of that kind of work. Those are big projects, continuing projects. We also do biological family work. So biofamily work we do a lot with DNA, and that's kind of what I described earlier about myself. It's finding biological family. So it could be maybe you're an adoptee and you don't know who your parents are, or often it's been happening too, where people have been coming to us and saying, my mother was adopted or my dad was adopted, and I want to know who his family was. And we can do that too. So I call that biofamily. And then finally, the third major area for family history, we call solve the problem. So this is kind of everything else, but it particularly focuses on brick walls. So I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast have experienced brick walls. So when we work on a brick wall project, and these are pretty often something like, I can't find the maiden name or the parents of this woman in my family before 1850. It's often something like that. And what we do then is we'll review the work. If this is someone who's done their own genealogy, we review their work. We look for areas where we could add additional records. So everyone on my team, I have 6 genealogists on my team, and everyone is a very high-level genealogist with a lot of experience. So we tend to know about a lot of record types that might not have been visited yet. And sometimes we've been able to solve the brick walls that way, but increasingly how we're doing it is with DNA. So DNA in that circumstance is a different deal than doing it for biological family. So for biological family, the matches are big, the matches are close, tends to be pretty straightforward to solve for people born in the US. When you're using DNA with a brick wall, then you're so far back in time that the matches tend to be small, like 20 centimorgans or 40 centimorgans or less even. We've been able to successfully use that in addition to records, to be able to figure out who somebody's parents are. So, for example, let's take the woman with the maiden name example. If we're looking at clusters of people named, Carter, and then we start comparing it to records, and suddenly we're realizing that, oh, look in the census, she and her husband are living next to a bunch of Carters, and there's a DNA, there are DNA matches that take us back to the Carters. That's how we break through those sometimes. And it's been amazing to do that, because for some of our clients, they've been researching those lines for 20, 30 years. And finally, DNA has made it, I'll go into another aspect of this, but in a minute, but DNA has made that possible to break those brick walls. And it also the clusters, we can tell where they are geographically. And sometimes that helps us put the whole puzzle together. More often than not, if we take a brick wall project, we solve it. We've had a really high success rate. That's but amazing. The other thing everybody needs to know too is record availability has gotten so much better, just even in the 6 years I've been running this business full time, because of things that Family Search has done with their AI searching, which has really opened up court records. and many other kinds of records. So we're really just using a combo of all of the best tools that are available, and it's made it possible to bust brick walls that couldn't be busted before.
When we were setting up the interview, one of the things you mentioned to me was, and the phrase you used was deep document research. Can you explain what that is?
Right, exactly. So a lot of times, not always, but kind of often, people have missed using family search. They've kind of stuck with ancestry. And if they're also using family search, they might have caught everything there, but they might not have. So, for example, we solved one down in Southern Ohio one time because there was a guardianship record that existed for the ancestor that they knew, and they were looking for that man's father. And because the father died when the child was underage, there was a guardianship. Now, guardianship at that time is all about protecting property assets, not protecting the physical, the life of the child, really. Not like we would think of it now. But at that time, if you can find a guardianship, it's going to name the parents, and that tied everything together. So that's one aspect of using deeper research. Another is we go heavy on probate records and on deeds. We use a lot of land research to try to put families together. So it's often a combination of fairly sophisticated document research plus DNA that helps us solve a really difficult problem.
Hi, everyone. Noel Poirier here, Executive Director of the Ohio Genealogical Society and your host for the Ohio Roots podcast. Did you know you can help preserve the past and empower the future? Your donation to the Ohio Genealogical Society helps protect vital family history records and supports research for generations to come. Visit www.ogs.org/donate and give today. Thank you so much for your support. You mentioned in your discussion about family search about how they've started to utilize AI to search through documents and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. What's your opinion on AI and genealogy moving forward?
We're using it on our team. I use it in the business, to help me with things, for example, like proposals. You have to be careful. You never put anybody's name in it or anything like that. But, there are ways that it helps business owners. So that's the first way. The second way is people on my team are very successfully using it for transcription. And that saves a lot of time, and it's enough, and to help us kind of say, okay, here's one more piece of evidence to add to the pile of, who this person's parents are, for example. I think, another thing that I've seen it do well is it can give you an idea of a research plan to follow. I know that it's being used to do research planning. I have seen it do a great job if someone sends me a really long email that lists out all the things that they've ever researched on this ancestor. And, it's kind of a lot for me to process quickly. AI can take that, organize it. Of course, I'm checking to make sure that, it caught everything correctly. But boy, that really helps when I get that outline. And so it's just, there's a lot of organization that it can do that can really save time. So those are some of the ways that we are definitely using it. I'd say largely transcription. And then, what I use it for business.
I was reading through your website, and you have clients on there that praise how straightforward questioning you do, and things like that. How do you approach a case when you get a client who's done a really extensive amount of genealogy on their family already, and they're trying to break through this brick wall? What's kind of the first step you're gonna walk them through?
I like to. Well, I'll say this: on almost all of our projects, we do an hour or two of feasibility. And we will ask for access to their tree. Send us what you have. Let us look at it, because we don't want to contract with someone if we don't feel like we can help them. If we don't feel like there's room to grow on what they're trying to do, have they really done it all? And, I have had clients hire us to gut check what they've done. Have I missed anything? Is there anything else I can try? Usually the thing they haven't tried is the DNA, usually. if it's somebody like that. But we want to honor what someone has already researched and make sure that we take a look at it. But there's often it's a rare client that's gone deep in deeds, for example, land records, and maybe they've hit probate a little bit, but they probably haven't hit court records, because honestly, court records were a bear to research until Family Search AI made it much easier. Like I'll give you an example from a family that I researched 5 years ago that would be way easier now. So there was a family in Southeast Ohio, and they had moved from Virginia. This is early, like 1825. And we were trying to prove who this man's sons were. And we had kind of an idea. Well, the kind of books that genealogy societies prepare, where they, this labor of love kind of research that they've done. You've got a ton of them in the OGS library. Right. So there happened to be one for that county. And in there, it was a burned county, and someone had taken like the records that were still available and kind of gotten everything out of them they possibly could. And one of them was, there was some probate that still existed. They had indexed every single name in probate files in that county. And this family had an unusual last name, which helped. And all 5 people in this family, the father, the elderly father, and his sons, all showed up at the same estate sale on the same day. Now, I got super lucky to find that because somebody had done this labor of love kind of work. Now, that's going to show up in Family Search's AI search in court records. That's the kind of thing that was lost before, because who would have known to look up the probate of this random neighbor where they went to his estate sale?
Kind of coming back to what you talked about, I think the term used was biological. Is it biological research or using DNA?
Biofamily research.
Biofamily research. Do you get cases of adoptees like yourself who are trying to find their birth parents, and how do you handle those very sensitive kind of cases?
Right. Well, it is sensitive because the finding of the people is usually not very hard, honestly. I mean, so many people have tested DNA. As long as they've tested on Ancestry, and if the client was born in the US, probably we can solve it pretty fast. Also, more states have made their adoption records available. So, not adoption, their original birth certificates available. And some of them have made it more easy for adult adoptees to get records. So you might at least get the mother's name that way. You may not get the father's name because often they were left off of birth certificates. But, everyone has an original birth certificate. Everyone who was adopted has 2. The one that they had when they were born with their bio mom's name, and then the one when they were adopted, because it gets changed. And it reads as if it's your original birth certificate, but it's not. Like in the state of Missouri, where I was born, I have a copy of both. And the one from adopted has the letter A after the number. It's got the same number on it. But basically, you get kind of a falsified birth certificate if you're an adoptee. But you have to know to go get those original birth certificates, because even if we use DNA, we need to use other things to be sure we have the right people. And by what I mean is, particularly for bio fathers, not the mothers so much, obviously, but for bio fathers, if there were 2 brothers in the same place at the same time, DNA is not going to separate them. So what we're looking for, and we had a couple cases that worked out this way. One of them, it could have been one of 2 brothers, but the mom was in southern Indiana. She was right by an enormous Army base, an Army processing facility in the 1940s, and she worked there. Brother number 1 is married and living 2 states away. Brother number 2 was in the Army, and we found records that showed he went through that base. The odds are he's the dad, right?
Right.
Just because of proximity and timing, and
high probability.
High opportunity. So, but that's what I mean, though. You have to look at sometimes other records, like, the fact that we knew where the mom was, and then we could tie it to where the dad was. That helped us separate two brothers. So that's why we don't just use DNA on any project. It's DNA in the context of all of the other records.
In that case, the sensitive subject of people who put their children up for adoption, and
right.
whether they want to be known to their their child.
Right.
How do you tackle that challenge?
Well, it's hard. I mean, this happened in my own family because my adoptive parents were really supportive, and they were like close to 90 when I found my birth family. But adoptive parents were really, really supportive. My husband's, they were like, we were told we could never mention it to him again. They were so upset by it that we had found the birth family. And that was hard. And that's what I tell clients. I mean, I'm like, a couple things. Like if you try to reach out to your birth family, you don't know what reception you're going to get, because it could be everything from wide open arms. We're so thrilled to find out. For so many women, it happened at a difficult time in their life. And for all kinds of good reasons, they put the baby up for adoption. A lot of times the dads never knew that they fathered a child. Some of them are thrilled to find out now. Some of them aren't. And so we always have to kind of, what I like to say to people is, we can tell you who everyone is, but you are going to have, if you try to reach out, you may get a hurtful react. Your feelings may be hurt by how they react, or it could be wonderful. But I do try to remind all of them that even if the living people, keep in mind whatever circumstance they were in, maybe even 40, 50 years ago, it's still hard. But it doesn't mean you don't own your ancestors. So what I try to encourage them is, but now you know which family you're from. And even if the alive people are being honestly mean sometimes, it doesn't mean you can't research the people back 2, 3, 4, 5 generations and figure out, I actually am a Mayflower descendant, or I had family at Jamestown, which is what I found about my family.
Yeah, it just seems like it's always such a struggle when you're dealing with adopted records and adoptees and the challenges of family life. If someone wants to reach out to Heritage Bridge to maybe talk to you about their project they have in mind, how would they go about reaching out to you?
Probably the best way is the contact form on our website. So the website is heritagebridge.com. And we are maybe the largest genealogy company in Ohio now. I know we're near the top if we're not at the top. And we do about 70 projects a year. And we go through a big process of trying to get to know the client, trying to understand what their project is, preparing a proposal. Because we want to make sure that we're going to reasonably be able to do the project both for us and for them before we would ever commit to taking it as a project. But there's a lot of information on that on our website.
Okay, great. Well, Laurie Hermance-Moore of Heritage Bridge, thank you so much for joining me on the OGS Ohio Roots podcast to discuss your work. It sounds fascinating, and I think people should definitely take the time to visit the website, heritagebridge.com, learn a little bit more about what you're doing. Thank you so much, Laurie.
Thank you, Noel.
Well, that wraps up our conversation with Laurie Hermance-Moore. Whether you are an attorney needing heir research or a family historian looking to document your legacy in a professional kind of book, Laurie's team at Heritage Bridge offers the expertise to find the answers you need. If you are ready to have a professional team gut check your research or help you tackle a long-standing brick wall, visit heritagebridge.com to learn more. Thank you for listening to the OGS Ohio Roots podcast, and we'll see you next time. If you enjoy listening to the Ohio Roots podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could go to whatever platform it is that you listen and give us a good review. Reviews help us get more listeners and reach more people with Ohio Roots and what we're trying to do with the Ohio Genealogical Society. So please, leave us a nice review, and thanks for listening.
The Ohio Roots podcast is brought to you by the Ohio Genealogical Society, the premier gateway for discovering your Ohio family history. Hosted by OGS Executive Director Noel Poyer and edited by Luke Poyer. Theme song is Beautiful Ohio, recorded by Bob Stanley and his orchestra in 1944. To learn more about joining the Ohio Genealogical Society, visit www.ogs.org.